My name is Daniel. I spent 15 years in the Army in logistics and convoy security. My job was to ensure that a container full of sensitive equipment left point A and arrived at point B, in a hostile country, without anyone touching it. I learned about secure routes, about how to be discreet, about following protocols, and most importantly, about not asking questions. My military training prepared me for a lot. For danger, for discipline, for pressure. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my manual prepared me for my last job. A job where I used all my skills not to protect treasures, but to destroy them. And I was paid very, very well for it. After I left the Army, I opened a small security consulting firm, and that's how they found me. An elite recruitment firm, the kind with offices in London and Zurich, contacted me. The offer was for a position as private collection manager. I was honest in the interview. I told the severe-looking woman who interviewed me, "Look, ma'am, I don't know anything about art. I don't know the difference between a Monet and a Manet. But I know about security, about humidity control, about the logistics of transporting high-value items, and above all, I know how to be discreet." She smiled for the first time, a thin smile that didn't last a second. "Mr. Daniel, our client is not looking for an art critic. He is looking for a professional. Your lack of emotional attachment to the material is, in fact, an advantage." I didn't understand what she meant by that, but I understood the salary she offered me. It was enough for me to retire in 5 years. I accepted. My new boss was Mr. Castillo, an almost legendary name in the industrial world. An old guard billionaire who had built his fortune on steel, on oil, on real things, not on cell phone apps. He was incredibly reclusive. No one had seen his face in newspapers or magazines for decades. On my first day, I wasn't taken to a mansion. A car picked me up and took me to an industrial area of the city. We stopped in front of a concrete warehouse, windowless, with no sign. It looked like an abandoned warehouse, but when the steel roll-up door opened, I understood. Inside, there were no forklifts or boxes. There was a structure, a cube of titanium and bulletproof glass, the size of a small house. It was the vault, the collection. I was introduced to Mr. Castillo right there. He was older and more fragile than I had imagined. A man in his 80s, small, in an impeccable suit, who walked with the aid of a dark wooden cane. But his eyes were as sharp as shards of glass, eyes that saw everything. "Daniel," he said, his voice a bit hoarse with age. "Welcome. This will be your domain. Your function is to ensure that nothing enters and nothing leaves without my express authorization. And that the conditions in here," he said, pointing to the temperature and humidity gauges, "remain more stable than our country's political system." I spent the first few weeks in a strangely quiet job. The vault was empty. I mean, almost empty. There were dozens of climate-controlled niches in the walls, all empty, waiting for their occupants. My job was to monitor the systems, check the alarms, and ensure that the technological perfection of that place remained perfect. It was the highest-paying and most boring job I'd ever had. Until on a Monday morning, the vault's phone rang. It was him. "Daniel, I have acquired a new piece. A small study of water lilies by Monet. It will arrive from Paris in 72 hours. Prepare the maximum level reception protocol." The operation was complex. It involved a private cargo plane, an armored truck, and a security team that escorted the climate-controlled wooden crate from the airport to our warehouse. I supervised every step. Finally, the painting was inside the vault, placed on a special easel in the center of the room. It was beautiful, even for a layman like me. The colors, the light, it was easy to understand why it was worth tens of millions of dollars. Mr. Castillo came down to the vault to see it. He stood looking at the painting in silence for a long time. I expected him to tell me to put it in one of the niches on the wall, but instead he turned to me. "Daniel," he began, "now that our first asset has arrived, I need to explain the true nature of your job." I just nodded. "People," he said, walking slowly around the painting, "think the pinnacle of possession is to have something. They're wrong. Children have things. Amateur collectors have things. True power, true exclusivity, is not in owning something that others desire. It's in owning something that no one else in the world can have, not even see." I remained silent, trying to understand his logic. "I don't want to be the owner of this Monet," he said, stopping in front of me. "I want to be the last owner of this Monet, the last person on earth to lay eyes on it." My military brain, trained for logic and pragmatism, was failing to process this. "Your job, Daniel, will always have 2 phases," he explained. "Phase 1, You will commission a replica, the best replica money can buy, so perfect it would fool the artist himself. Phase 2. When the replica is ready and approved by me, you will supervise the destruction of the original. I must have had a stunned look on my face because he smiled with those glass-like eyes of his. Yes, Daniel. Destruction. Complete. Irreversible. We have a small chamber over there in the corner. He pointed to a steel door I thought led to a generator. It's a plasma incinerator. It reaches 3,000 degrees Celsius. Not even dust is left. Only the memory. My memory. That I was the last. I was shocked. It was the most insane, most arrogant, most billionaire idea I had ever heard. Destroy a Monet? For philosophy? He seemed to read my thoughts. Don't worry, Daniel. You won't be a vandal. You will be a priest. The priest of a very exclusive ceremony. He walked to a small table and picked up a black leather folder. He handed it to me. Your first task, Phase 1. I opened the folder. Inside there wasn't a contract or a spreadsheet. There was just a single business card with a name and a phone number from an address in Amsterdam, and nothing more. Contact this man, said Mr. Castillo. His name is Vander Molen. He is the best art forger in the world. Tell him we have a new project, and that the budget, as always, is unlimited. I took the folder. The card felt like it was burning in my hand. In that moment, I finally understood my job description. I hadn't been hired to be a manager. I had been hired to be the priest at a very, very expensive funeral, the funeral of a work of art, and my job was to ensure the burial was a success. I stood in the middle of the vault holding that leather folder. Inside it, the business card of the world's best forger. On the outside, the original Monet painting worth more than I could dream of earning in 1,000 lifetimes. And in front of me, my boss, Mr. Castillo, with a look that brooked no hesitation. My military brain took over. Faced with an order, no matter how absurd, you don't question it. You execute. The why was none of my business. My job was the how. That same afternoon, I made the call from an encrypted phone installed in the vault for this purpose. The number was from Amsterdam. A man answered on the second ring, his voice deep with a heavy Dutch accent. Hello? I'm calling at the request of Mr. Castillo, I said, following the protocol that was in the folder. We have a new project. There was a silence on the other end. Are the conditions the same? The voice asked. The same, I confirmed. The budget is unlimited. I'll need the preliminary analyses in 48 hours, he said. Chemical composition of the pigments, infrared reflectography of the underlying sketch, and a high-resolution 3D scan of the canvas texture and brushstrokes. And this time, I will require a private viewing session with the original. The last job I did for your boss, the Degas, had a layer of varnish that the digital analysis didn't quite capture. I won't make the same mistake. He hung up. There was no please, no thank you. It was a business transaction, as if we were ordering parts for an engine. My next task was to hire the scientists, a team from a Swiss company specializing in art conservation and analysis. They arrived 2 days later, looking like a SWAT team with metal briefcases full of equipment that looked like it came from a forensics lab. I watched them work for almost 12 hours. They set up a small laboratory around the Monet. They took microsamples of the pigments. They bombarded the canvas with X-rays and infrared light. They mapped every crack, every layer of paint, every thread of the canvas. It was a cold scientific process that dissected the soul of the painting and turned it into terabytes of data. At the end of the day, they handed me a hard drive. Everything your forger needs is on here, the team leader said, and they left, without ever asking why a collector would need such a ridiculously detailed analysis. The money bought their silence too. I sent the data to Amsterdam, and then the waiting game began. Weeks passed, then months. My routine returned to that of a technological monk, monitoring the systems of the empty vault, except for the solitary Monet on its easel. On the first day of every month, a briefcase would arrive for me. Inside, a payment in cash, a salary that allowed me to pay off my apartment, buy a new car, invest, and all I had to do was ensure that an empty vault remained empty and perfect. After 4 months, Vander Molen, the forger, made contact. The replica was ready for final inspection. He came in person, bringing the work in a crate identical to the originals. The moment the two paintings met was surreal. I, Daniel, the man who barely knew what Impressionism was, placed side by side on 2 identical easels, the original Monet and its copy. They were perfect, indistinguishable. I walked from one to the other, trying to find a flaw, A different brushstroke, a shade of color that was a millimeter off. Nothing. The man's work was of a frightening genius. He didn't copy a painting. He seemed to channel the spirit of the dead artist and paint through him. Mr. Castillo came down for the inspection. He didn't say a word for almost an hour. He just circled the two works, examining them with a jeweler's loupe. The silence was broken only by the soft hum of the climate control system. Finally, he stopped and pointed to the painting on the right. "This is the original," he said. I, who had already forgotten which was which, had to check my own discreet markings. He was right. Van der Molen's work is acceptable, Castillo said, which I imagined was the highest compliment he was capable of giving. He paid the forger, who left as silently as he had arrived, and now I had two identical Monets in the vault. "It's time, Daniel," Mr. Castillo said a few days later. Phase 2. My stomach tied itself in a knot. I knew what that meant. The protocol for destruction was even stricter than for reception. I had to wear an anti-static suit, special gloves, and shoe covers. Not a single hair, not a single skin particle could contaminate the incinerator chamber. It was a ceremony that required purity. With my heart beating a little faster, I walked to the painting on the right, the original. I took the frame with the utmost care. The painting was light, but it felt like it weighed a ton in my hands. I was holding a treasure of human history, and I was taking it to death row. I crossed the polished floor of the vault. Each step echoed. I felt the imaginary eyes of the art world on my back, cursing me, but my face remained neutral. I was a soldier following an order. I reached the steel door in the corner of the room. I opened it. The plasma incinerator was a white ceramic chamber, impeccably clean. There was a small pedestal in the center. With surgical delicacy, I placed the masterpiece upon it. The image of the water lilies, so calm and beautiful, seemed to mock the violence of what was about to happen. I closed the heavy door. There was a small, thick, heat-proof glass window that allowed one to see inside. Mr. Castillo approached and stood beside me. He looked through the small window at his newest and briefest acquisition. He said nothing. He just watched in silence for about 5 minutes, his private farewell. Then he turned to me. His face showed no emotion, not pleasure, not sadness, just finality, like an accountant closing the books for the month. "You may initiate the sequence, Daniel," he said, his voice firm. I turned to the control panel next to the incinerator. There was a series of buttons and lights, but one stood out. A large red button protected by a transparent acrylic cover, the button that would turn beauty into ashes. I lifted the acrylic cover. The red button pulsed with a faint light. There I was, an ex-soldier, trained to protect lives and property, and my finger was an inch from a button that would turn one of humanity's greatest treasures into nothing more than a memory in the head of an eccentric old man. And the worst part, the part that haunts me to this day, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. It was just another protocol to be followed. It was just my job. My finger pressed the red button. There was no explosion, no doomsday noise, just a high-pitched hum that quickly rose in frequency, and a light, a blinding white light, so intense that I had to look away, even through the protective glass. I glanced at the monitor next to it, which showed the internal temperature of the chamber. In 10 seconds, it went from 20 to 3,000 degrees Celsius. I looked back at the small window. The Monet masterpiece didn't burn. It didn't turn into flames and smoke. It simply ceased to exist, vaporized. In the blink of an eye, the canvas, the paint, the colors, the water lilies, everything was disintegrated at a molecular level. What was left was just an empty white ceramic chamber, glowing with heat. The cycle ended. The warning lights went out. The humming stopped. Mr. Castillo gave a single, satisfied nod. "Excellent, Daniel. Clean. Precise. You may dismiss the transport security team. Their work here is done." He turned and left, going up in his private elevator without another word, and I was left there alone in the now silent vault, with the smell of ionized air and the ghost of a $50 million painting. That was the first funeral, but it wasn't the last. That became my life. Every 3 or 4 months, Mr. Castillo would acquire a new masterpiece, a Van Gogh, a Cézanne, a rare Degas, and the ritual would repeat with the same military precision. I supervised the transport. I hired the team of Swiss scientists. I sent the data to my contact in Amsterdam. I waited for months. I received the replica, And finally, I presided over the destruction ceremony. I became an expert in a craft that doesn't exist. I learned to differentiate types of varnish by smell, to recognize the tension of an old canvas just by touch. I learned how to pack a priceless painting so it wouldn't suffer from even the vibration of the air. And I learned to press the red button without feeling a single thing. The initial shock gave way to routine. The absurd became my daily life. I was well paid to follow protocols, and I was very good at it. I stopped asking why. Mr. Castillo's crazy philosophy was his justification, not mine. Mine was my paycheck. And with it, I built a comfortable and empty life. For almost 3 years, the system worked like clockwork, until the Vermeer arrived. The concert. It was one of the most famous paintings in the world, stolen from a museum decades ago and thought to be lost forever. Somehow, through his contacts in the art underworld, Castillo found it and bought it. The operation to bring it to our vault was the most complex of all. It involved intermediaries, Swiss accounts, and a level of secrecy that bordered on state-sponsored paranoia. But in the end, there it was, in the center of my vault. A work of such beauty and value that it made the Monet look like child's play. The protocol began as always. The scientists came, did their analysis. I sent the terabytes of data to van der Molen, the forger, and that's when the first piece of the system fell out of place. His reply came the next day, an encrypted message, longer and more irritated than usual. Daniel, the message read, I've received the data for the Vermeer, and I must say, there is a problem, a serious problem. The scan data is too perfect. The reflectography shows not a single pentimento. There's no trace of a sketch, of a correction, of the artist's doubt under the layer of paint. The canvas structure is too uniform for a 17th century linen. I've already replicated 3 works for your boss. I know the work of the old masters. They were geniuses, but they were human. They made mistakes. They changed their minds. The soul of a painting is in its imperfections, and this one has none. The message ended abruptly. Tell Mr. Castillo that with this data, I can create a beautiful copy, but not a perfect replica. Something is wrong. It seems you've sent me the data of a copy, not the original. I read that and felt a chill. Not because I understood the artistic implications, but because it was the first time there had been a flaw in the protocol, a complaint. I took the message to Mr. Castillo, and for the first time, I saw him lose his composure. Idiot, he snarled after reading the message. That man is getting old and paranoid. He's trying to squeeze more money out of me. His philosophical calm had vanished, replaced by an ugly, raw anger. Tell him to do the damn job with the data he has, or I'll find a younger forger in China who will do twice the work for half the price and without so many stupid questions. His reaction was so disproportionate it surprised me. It was the reaction of a man whose scheme was being threatened, not an eccentric collector. But I, as always, just obeyed. I relayed the message to van der Molen, who reluctantly agreed to proceed. Months passed. The Vermeer replica arrived, and as always, it was perfect to my layman's eyes. The 2 paintings side by side were identical twins. The day for Phase 2 was set. The day of the Vermeer's funeral, I began the ritual, put on the suit, the gloves, and I approached the painting that, according to the label, was the original. But as I reached out to take it, the forger's words echoed in my head. It seems you've sent me the data of a copy. And then, I did something I had never done before. An impulse, a break in my own protocol, a purely professional curiosity. If the process had a flaw, I wanted to see it. Next to my workstation was the kit the Swiss scientists used. I picked up one of their instruments, a small jeweler's loupe with an integrated ultraviolet light, something they use to analyze layers of varnish. With my heart beating a little faster, I approached the original painting. I chose a discreet spot, a dark corner in the background of the painting, a place no one would ever look at closely, and I positioned the loupe over it. I turned on the UV light, and I looked. I didn't know exactly what to look for, maybe a different type of pigment, an irregularity, but what I saw was much simpler and much more shocking. Trapped, sandwiched between the final layer of paint and the first layer of varnish, was a single, tiny fiber, a fiber of a bright, synthetic blue, the kind that only exists in modern fabrics, like the microfiber cloths that cleaning crews use, a fiber that could not, in any reality, in any universe, exist in a 300-year-old painting. It could only be there if that layer of varnish had been applied recently. The painting in front of me, the one the world believed to be the lost original Vermeer, the work that was destined for the fire, was a fake. It was the copy, and I suddenly understood everything. The ritual wasn't about destroying the original. Van der Molen was right. Mr. Castillo was not a mad philosopher. He was something much, much worse. And I was not a priest. I was the primary witness to a crime, and I didn't even know what the crime was yet. My hand trembled for a fraction of a second before I pressed the button. I composed myself. It was a job, a protocol. I pressed it. The blinding white light filled the chamber, and the Vermeer worth hundreds of millions of dollars vanished from the face of the earth. At least that's what I thought. Mr. Castillo gave his usual satisfied nod and retired. I was left behind, in the silence of the vault, with a secret that was eating me up inside. The blue fiber. The proof that the painting I had just incinerated was a fake. But it didn't make sense. Why pay a fortune to a forger to create a perfect replica, only to have me burn another forgery? What was the point of this expensive and complicated theater? My mind, trained in logistics and finding flaws in systems, went to work. I needed data. I needed to understand the workflow of the process. In the following days, I locked myself in my office inside the vault. I had access to all acquisition and movement records for the collection. I started at the beginning, with the Monet, the first funeral I had officiated. I pulled his files. There were hundreds of pages. Purchase contract from the auction, $50 million. Certificates of authenticity, and in the middle of the paperwork, something that had seemed strange at the time but that I had ignored, an insurance policy. Why, I asked myself, would you take out a $50 million insurance policy on a painting you plan to destroy in a few months? It made no sense. Unless the destruction wasn't the final plan. I kept digging. I needed to see what happened after that day, after I pressed the button and vaporized the Monet. I searched the collection's financial archives, and then I found it. A document from 3 years ago, dated 2 months after the destruction. It was an insurance claim to one of the largest insurance companies in the world. The reason for the claim was a work of fiction as brilliant as Van der Molen's replicas. Total loss of the asset due to a catastrophic failure and unexpected overheating of the incineration unit during a routine cleaning cycle. It was a perfect lie, supported by technical reports from an engineering firm, which I later discovered also belonged to Castillo, and by my own incident report, which I had been instructed to fill out at the time, thinking it was a mere formality, and at the end of the process, the final proof. A bank transfer record. The insurance company had paid Mr. Castillo the full amount of the policy, $50 million. I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. The entire truth unfolded before me, in all its criminal and brilliant glory. The scheme was a Swiss watch. Step 1. Castillo buys a masterpiece, say, the Monet, for $50 million. The news spreads through the art world. Step 2. He insures the work for its full value. Step 3. He secretly hires a first forger to make a high-quality copy. Step 4. What arrives at my vault, what I believe to be the original, is already this first copy. The real Monet never even sets foot in there. It's probably diverted during transport at some airport in Europe and sent elsewhere. Step 5. I, the innocent and art-ignorant security manager, receive copy A, thinking it's the original. Then I hire Van der Molen, the second forger, to make copy B, based on copy A. That's why Van der Molen complained about the Vermeer data. He, a master, realized he was copying a copy. Step 6. I supervise the destruction of copy A, the first forgery. Step 7. Castillo files the insurance claim, gets his $50 million back, using my report as proof of the accidental loss. The final result, Mr. Castillo has his $50 million back in his pocket, and he still has the original Monet, hidden somewhere in the world. He was assembling the most valuable art collection in history, for free, and I was the centerpiece of his fraud, the perfect witness, the useful idiot who supervised the crime without knowing it was happening. My admiration for the genius of the plan was quickly replaced by an icy fear. I wasn't a witness to a philosophical madness. I was an accomplice to a multi-billion-dollar fraud, and people who orchestrate plans like this don't like loose ends. And I was the biggest loose end of all. I needed more. I needed to know where he was hiding the originals. If I was going to confront him or report him, I needed all the cards in my hand. I went back to searching the files. This time, Mr. Castillo's personal logistics and transport records. They were trips, shipments, container movements. I looked for a pattern, a destination that repeated, and I found it. It wasn't an obvious city like New York, London, or Paris. It was an address in a free port, a free trade zone next to the airport in Singapore. Over the last few years, Castillo had sent dozens of crates there. The description on the cargo manifest was always vague and boring. Classic furniture pieces, garden sculptures, antiques. A lie. He wasn't sending furniture. He was sending the originals. The Monet, the Degas, the Cézanne, and now, the Vermeer. He was using the free ports, ultra-secure, tax-exempt warehouses, true tax havens for luxury goods, as his secret, private museum. I had the treasure map. I had the proof of the crime and the location where the bodies, or rather the paintings, were buried. I felt for a moment in control. It was at that exact moment that a small red pop-up appeared in the corner of my computer screen. It was an alert window from the security system I had helped design myself, an alert I had never seen before. The text was simple and terrifying. Security. Alert. Access to Omega-level logistics files detected. Surveillance protocol activated. Subject, Daniel. I froze. My blood seemed to turn to ice. Omega level. Those were the files that only he and his global head of security could access. They were a silent alarm, a trigger. I hadn't found the secret. I had walked into the trap. I looked at the small security camera lens in the corner of my office. Before, it was part of my defense system. Now, I knew there was a pair of eyes on the other side, watching me. The hunter had just discovered that, all along, he was the prey. That red alert flashing on my screen wasn't a warning. It was a sentence. Surveillance protocol activated. Subject, Daniel. In my entire military and security career, I've learned one thing. When the enemy knows that you know, the time for thinking is over. It's time to act or die. But I was locked inside the most secure vault in the world. My fortress had become my trap. I had nowhere to run. I could only wait, and I didn't have to wait long. The intercom in my office, which had never been used before, crackled to life, and Mr. Castillo's voice filled the room. The same calm, hoarse voice as always, but now, it sounded like the scraping of a tombstone. Daniel, I see your curiosity has finally overcome your discipline. A pity. I had high hopes for you. Please meet me in my viewing room. Now, the voice went silent. Viewing room? I didn't even know that place existed. A section of the vault map on my monitor, which had previously been locked, was now flashing green. It was an order, an invitation to the lion's den. With my heart in my throat, but with the impassive face that years of training had given me, I walked there. It was a door that had always been there, but that I never had authorization to open. It unlocked as I approached. Inside, it wasn't a control room. It was a sort of private luxury cinema. There was a single, comfortable leather armchair facing a wall that was actually a high-definition screen. And sitting in the armchair, with his back to me, was him, Mr. Castillo. The screen in front of him wasn't showing a movie. It was showing the live feeds from all the security cameras in the vault, including the one from my office, which showed my computer screen with the logistics files I had just accessed. I hired you for your ability to follow protocols, Daniel, he said without turning around. For your discretion, for your detachment. You've disappointed me. I took a deep breath. The fear was there, but the anger at the manipulation gave me courage. Protocols? I said, my voice coming out firmer than I felt. You mean the protocol for committing global-scale insurance fraud? Using the destruction of fake works of art as a front? He finally turned slowly in his chair, a thin, amused smile on his lips. Ah, so you figured it all out, the insurance fraud, the copies, the Singapore Freeport. I'm impressed. Truly. He didn't deny it. He confirmed it with pride. I gave you a simple job, Daniel, he continued. An absurdly well-paying job. All you had to do was not be curious, but you were. You pulled the thread. And now, you've seen the weaver. You're a criminal, I said. I am a businessman, he corrected, with an irritating calm. I just understood that the value of an object is not in the object itself, but in the story told about it. And I am the best storyteller there is. I create a story of acquisition, then I create a story of destruction. The insurance company believes it. The art world mourns, and I get to keep the money and the merchandise. It's the best business in the world, and you were a key part of it. I was your eyewitness, your perfect alibi. I completed the puzzle fitting together. Exactly. he said, "and you were excellent in your role, until now." I knew what was coming next. The threat, the elimination. But again, he surprised me. "You're the first one who's figured it out," he said, analyzing me with those hawk-like eyes of his. "In all these years, the scientists, the security guards, even van der Molen with his suspicions, no one ever put all the pieces together. You have a mind for logistics and for finding flaws in systems that is remarkable. I underestimated you, and a man like me doesn't waste talent." I remained silent, not understanding where he was going with this. "I'm not going to kill you, Daniel," he said, to my utter astonishment. "That would be inelegant and a waste. I have a proposal for you. A promotion." "A promotion?" I thought I was going to be fired, or worse. "This scheme with the art is just one of my operations," he said. "A small part of a much more complex portfolio of activities that require a level of discretion and planning most people do not possess. And I'm getting old. I need someone to manage these operations." He leaned forward. "I want you to stop being the collection manager and become my director of covert operations. You will no longer burn the copies. You will help me plan the secret transports of the originals. You will oversee the logistics of my other companies around the world. You will become my right-hand man, the man who ensures my protocols are executed perfectly at all levels." The offer was insane. He wasn't punishing me for discovering his crime. He was rewarding me. "You are no longer the priest of the funeral, Daniel," he said with a glint in his eye. "I am offering you the chance to be the architect of the cemetery." I stared at him, shocked. It was a choice I never imagined I'd have to make. On one side, my honor, my integrity, everything I learned in the military. On the other, a world of power and wealth I didn't even know existed. "And if I refuse?" I asked, my mouth dry. His smile vanished. His face became a mask of coldness. "If you refuse, Daniel, then you go back to being what you were 5 minutes ago. A risk. An error on my balance sheet. And I don't keep risks on my balance sheet. You will simply cease to be a problem. Your life, your family that you think is safe in the countryside, everything becomes a variable that needs to be eliminated to protect the larger system. No one will ever find the bodies." The threat, when it came, was direct, cold, and total. He offered me the world, a world of power and wealth I didn't even know existed. The only thing I had to do was sell the one thing I still thought I had, my honor, the honor of a soldier. "I am a generous man," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I'll give you the night to think. The vault is locked until dawn. When the sun rises, your office door will open. You can come to me with your acceptance, and we'll begin a new and profitable partnership. Or you can try something stupid. The choice is yours." He turned back to the screen, dismissing me, and I walked out of the viewing room, back to my small office. A man with an impossible choice, to be a criminal or a dead man, and I had until dawn to decide the price of my soul. I spent the next few hours in the darkness of my office, in the heart of the vault, with Mr. Castillo's ultimatum echoing in my head. Dawn was approaching, and with it, my sentence. My military strategist's mind analyzed the options, coldly. Option A, accept the offer. I would live. My family would live. I would become unimaginably rich and powerful. The price? My soul. I would become a high-level criminal, a manager of operations whose nature I didn't even want to imagine. I would be loyal to a monster for the rest of my life. Option B, refuse the offer. I would keep my honor intact for a few more hours. And then, I would disappear. My family would disappear. We would be an operating cost in Castillo's empire, a silent, meaningless death that would change nothing. He would simply find another Daniel, perhaps one with less curiosity. Both options were a defeat. In one, I lost my soul. In the other, I lost my life. A good soldier never accepts a battle where all exits lead to defeat. He creates a third option. And then, I remembered him. The only unpredictable element in Castillo's entire perfect system, van der Molen. The forger, the man who complained, who suspected, who was insulted. He wasn't an employee. He was an art mercenary, a criminal with his own code of honor, and most importantly, with a wounded ego. He was my wild card. A plan began to form in my head. A risky, dangerous plan. A plan that required me to take a step even deeper into the darkness before trying to see the light. The sun rose. The soft light indicated that my time was up. My office door unlocked automatically. It was time. I walked with firm steps to the viewing room. Mr. Castillo was there, in the same spot, waiting for me. "So, Daniel," he asked, "what's your decision? The architect or the dust?" I looked him in the eye. "I accept," I said, my voice firm, without hesitation. "I accept the position, Director of Covert Operations." A victorious smile spread across his wrinkled face. "I knew you were a practical man." "Excellent. Welcome to the team, Daniel." "Thank you, sir," I replied, playing my new role. "Good," he said. "Then, let's get to your first official task. There's a small logistics problem that needs your attention. The Vermeer, the original. With all this confusion, its transport to Singapore has not yet been finalized. It's still here in the vault. I want you to arrange the shipment. Immediately. Use our Omega-level protocols, discreet and fast. It was the opportunity I needed. His test of loyalty would be my window for betrayal. "Consider it done, sir," I said. I spent the next few hours at my logistics terminal, now with a level of access I'd never had before. I had total control over cargo manifests, flight routes, secret containers. I created a transport order for a high-value, climate-controlled crate. Destination, Singapore. All according to protocol. But in a subsystem, I altered a single piece of data, the final delivery address. The container wasn't going to the Freeport warehouse in Singapore. I diverted it to a different address, a small art warehouse in Amsterdam. Next, I sent a single encrypted message to van der Molen. The message was short. "The original Vermeer. As an apology for our lack of professionalism and for doubting your competence. Consider it a bonus." I knew he would understand. The original Vermeer was a king's retirement for him, and the chance to have the last laugh at the man who had insulted him. After the system confirmed that the container with the painting was already in the air, out of Castillo's reach, I went for my final confrontation. I entered his viewing room unannounced. "Mr. Castillo," I said, "I've come to tender my resignation." He turned, furious. "What? You just accepted. What is this, a joke?" "No," I replied calmly. "It's a renegotiation of my exit package." "I'll kill you right here," he snarled, grabbing a phone on the table. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said, and my calm seemed to disarm him. "You see, the original Vermeer is not on its way to Singapore. I've diverted it. Right now it's on its way to Amsterdam, into the hands of an old friend of yours." His face went white. He understood instantly. "You can't kill me, Castillo," I explained, as if I were presenting a report. "Because the moment I disappear, your big secret is no longer between us. It's between you and van der Molen. And unlike me, he wasn't paid to be discreet. He's a criminal you humiliated, who now holds a $300 million work of art as collateral. He will blackmail you until your last breath. Or maybe he'll just sell the painting on the black market and expose your entire fraud out of pure spite." I paused, letting the words sink in. "But if you leave me and my family in peace, I will disappear. I'll drop off the map. And the secret of all the other paintings you have hidden, the Monet, the Degas, the Cézanne, that secret dies with me. In other words, sir, I become your insurance policy." He was silent. A silence filled with hatred, with fury, but also with understanding. For the first time in his life, the great player had been put in checkmate. He couldn't win. The only thing he could do was not lose everything. I turned and walked away. I left the vault, left the warehouse, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. Months passed. I moved to a small coastal town where nobody knew me. I lived a simple life, with the money I had saved. A life without luxury, but a life. One day, a postcard arrived in my mailbox. No return address. The image on the front was of the painting, The Concert, by Vermeer. I turned the postcard over. There was no message. Just a small, elegant signature in one corner. Van der Molen's signature. Castillo thought he had offered me a choice between being a criminal or a dead man, but he forgot that there is a third option, a soldier's option, and a good soldier knows that sometimes to win the war, you don't have to destroy your enemy. You just have to ensure his own weapons are pointed at himself. Mutually assured destruction. I didn't get justice. I didn't get wealth. I just got my freedom and silence. And in the end, in Mr. Castillo's world, silence is the only commodity that truly has any value.